All right, so let's talk about Pluto in Capricorn, the wind down years, which we are characterizing as 2020 to 2024. So the last few degrees of Capricorn that Pluto is traversing and activating, and the coming to an end of a time cycle, a phase which we measure by describing it as a Capricornian phase. So Pluto traversing the sign field of Capricorn. And so it's a way of understanding and marking a particular time cycle. And of course, these time cycles, well, as the name suggests, as the word suggests, well, they happen again and again. And so, as we were saying in our recent communication regarding Jupiter in Pisces and Neptune in Pisces, we mentioned this notion that, well, astrology helps you to measure the movement of your consciousness as it traverses familiar roads in a cyclical fashion. And so you get to come to periodically the same road, so to speak, and then you measure how you come to that road by the changes in your consciousness. So perhaps, as we were saying, you are traveling a road, but you then might use a different car, or it might be a different day or a different week. Same road, same structure, but you're coming to it with a fresh experience. And so that is how we want to just introduce this notion of time cycles, the opportunity for consciousness to revisit familiar territory to see how it will meet familiar territory in a new instance. So it might seem a bit paradoxical, but it's this dance between the old and the new. And of course, consciousness is always reaching toward new horizons. And so when you come to familiar parts of the road, meaning you've been there before, but you come to it from a different standpoint of consciousness. So we're suggesting that in our analogy, the new car would be symbolic of the new consciousness that you are using to traverse that old territory. So you're coming to a familiar road, but you are coming in a new car. And so that new car would be symbolic of the changes in your consciousness. So time cycles help you to revisit patterns and lessons. And these patterns and lessons come about in different contexts. So you're able to go back and measure the frequencies of your own consciousness, meaning your evolution, your perception, your growth. You get to measure all of that by going back to the same patterns and lessons, but well, how do you meet it at this new opportunity, in this new instance? So there's that. So humanity has been in a Pluto and Capricorn phase. Yes. And it is a phase that is winding down, having began in 2008. So looking at a Pluto in Capricorn stretch from 2008 until 2024. And so we have been in a time cycle, a phase of revisiting Pluto in Capricorn themes, coming back to this portion of the road. And well, what do we witness and what do we see? But first, let's just take a look at the basic astrological lay of the land in terms of this final Pluto in Capricorn phase, the wind down years, 2020 to 2024. So we have Pluto entering Aquarius on the 23rd of March next year, 2023. And then Pluto will retrograde back into Capricorn around mid-June, June 12 or so. And it continues to be in Capricorn. And, well, let's just say that there is a sort of transition zone that Pluto is in between, dancing between Capricorn and Aquarius. But by November 2024, Pluto will settle down properly into Aquarius. And so that's what we have dealing with. So we're in this transition zone as Pluto activates the final degrees of the sign, 27, 28, 29, thereabouts. So that's what we're looking at. So the question is, well, as we've come to this Capricorn part of the road, again, what Have we noticed? What lessons are we learning or playing out again and learning from a new standpoint or perspective? So, Pluto, a planet that reflects back to you in various ways your relationship with power. Power, a Pluto idea. And so, in the final wind down years, you've had a particular opportunity to look at your relationship with power as world events have put on the table this question of, well, where does my power begin? Am I a sovereign human being? What do I think about power? Who has power? Do I have power? Who do I assign power in my life personally, on the global collective level? And so what has happened on the global collective level is showing you your beliefs about the nature of power. And so you must watch to see, you can watch global events to have a sense of, well, how is humanity regarding its relationship with power? And that relationship with power has a collective component and a personal component. And so often, let's say, what happens on the personal level in terms of the individual relationship to power? Well, of course, that becomes magnified on the collective level and creates a certain pattern of consciousness. And so there is a mass consciousness when it comes to the nature of power. And so, big questions. Who has the power to tell you to do what? A big, big question in the COVID years. So, whatever your personal opinion might have been about COVID or a pandemic, the point is that, well, you have bigger issues to sort of look at, meaning inherent in that event is a series of questions that go to the heart of your position as a species and go to the heart of what you believe about yourself as a species. Deeper questions. So outer events are always symbolic of inner dynamics. And so you want to look out at the world and say, well, what is this reflecting about the inner spiritual, energetic dynamics of the collective species at this time? So who has power? Do I have power? Who has the authority? Pluto in Capricorn. Capricorn assigned to do with authority. Authority on the physical level. So authority would be in the form of social institutions that you assign or ascribe power to. That's the outer representation of authority, the institutions that you give, let's say, managerial power to. So that would be in the form of your government or other institutions that have a managerial role and function. There's that external component, but there's also the inner spiritual component of authority. Are you an authority in your own life? To what things do you give authority? Who in your life has authority in relation to you? And so Capricorn is, from a higher spiritual standpoint, it would be about the need to cultivate, or the phase of cultivating in the human evolutionary story, the phase of cultivating inner spiritual authority. And inner spiritual authority would mean a certain Capricornian, Saturnian, inner self-reliance. And so self-reliance, of course, in turn, relies on your ability to trust yourself. You can only rely on yourself when you can trust yourself and you can trust your basic instincts. Questions to do with power and authority, they have to do with your ability to trust yourself, which is the ability to be self-reliant. But the interesting irony, the interesting thing is that the less you trust yourself, the less the inner faculty of trust, of inner trust develops. So trusting of self has to be practiced in order for you to have a basis to trust yourself. So that's one of the keys that has been missing in terms of humanity's relationship with power, because you would hand over authority because you do not trust yourself and your own capacity to have authority in respect of or in relation to your own life. And so you hand over that function It's easier to be a child. So the Cancerian phase, Cancer, Capricorn, zodiacal axis, oppositions, Cancer, the child phase, Capricorn, the adult phase. So when you do not have inner self-reliance, well, you are in, let's say, a child phase, in that a child would be dependent on being led by certain parental authorities. And that's the way that things have been done here in terms of raising children. Children would not quite yet have complete responsibility over their lives, because that responsibility is being led and directed for a period of time. It is in the hands of the parents. And so the child would be generally less self-reliant, just in basic principle. And so part of maturing is relying more and more upon yourself and doing that successfully. So it would be the dignity of self-reliance, the dignity of knowing that, I can trust myself, I can rely on my own internal resources. A very Capricorn thing, Saturnian, Capricornian sort of general quality. And so trust in yourself means that you regard yourself with dignity. And if you regard yourself with dignity, it means that you're saying to yourself, well, I'm worthy of my own trust. When you are worthy of your own trust, you make decisions that are self-sufficient. You rely on yourself because you are trusting yourself. And so a huge component, a big part of the story of humanity's relationship with power, as we said, is trust, or lack of it. And the lack of it has come because you've been, let's say, indoctrinated out of the soundness of your human template. So you don't think that your thoughts and emotions can be trusted. And it's not to excuse every thought and emotion that everyone has. It's saying that the more you learn how to use your internal thought and emotional energetic system, the more you learn how to use that properly in organic alignment with your structure, the more you find reason to trust yourself and to find dignity in your own humanity. And so this is a big lesson in the Pluto in Capricorn years. To what degree are you going to give over your authority to people in your life, institutions? If you trust yourself, you have confidence in your own decisions that you make for yourself. That confidence and that trust, it gives you a reason to trust yourself. Meaning, the more you trust yourself, the more you have a reason to trust yourself, the more you invest in the idea that you can be trusted, the more yourself gives you evidence that you can in fact be trusted. And so you find increasing the rewards the more you invest in this business of self-trust. Self-trust, well, that would completely change your relationship to the authorities in your life, personally and collectively, because a self-reliant human being is a free human being. And so it's not to say that you don't work cooperatively with others, but the willingness to trust yourself, which is the basis of self-reliance, means that you are less liable to be controlled, less liable to being controlled, less liable to giving over your sense of your personal authority to the whims and idiosyncrasies of authorities and powers in the world. So adulthood, maturity in the world, a Capricornian thing, rests on a foundation of self-trust and self-reliance. And so you would not see many of the dynamics on the planet in relation to your institutions and in relation to other managing structures. You would not see those dynamics replicate themselves if you had a different relationship with this notion of self-trust. And so the Pluto in Capricorn years, well, it would show you, it reflects to you back your own beliefs. In this final phase too, the last 4 years, it all comes to a head. You really magnify on the global stage and scale. You magnify for yourselves to see what your relationship with power is. So we've had very interesting scenarios that are testing testing beliefs about who has power, who doesn't. So monarchs pass, and well, what is your relationship to that concept of a monarch? Well, the fact that you have one or have had on the planet, well, that is evidence of a certain belief system. Perhaps you've bought into the notion that inherently there are people who have power, and inherently there are those who don't have power. And so look at your systems to see what beliefs you are taking part in. When you don't believe in your own power, it becomes easy to say, well, that person has power. I don't. So let me give over my freedoms, give over my sense of my own authority to be managed. And so these are some of the dynamics that you are playing out. So again, on the global scale, your collective thought forms are producing outer events that reflect back to you the nature of your individual and collective relationship with power. And so perhaps you think about, well, what about my relationship with power would I like to change? What about it? So the final phase, the final Pluto in Capricorn phase, last 4 years, well, they are a big showdown between, let's say, those or forces, so to speak, who believe that they have a right to power at your expense. A showdown between those kinds of forces and the people who dare to believe that they can trust themselves, that they can rely on the dignity of their own humanity to know how to make sound decisions, and who do not need to be babied, and who do not feel that they ought to or need to be managed. And so there is a growing up that's taking place on the planet, a remembrance of the internal codes, so to speak, of the human template. And one of those codes is a direct relationship with the source of your own existence in the most fundamental sense, so that you have that personal, individual relationship, your relationship between who you are and the forces that sustain and maintain and breathe life into your existence, your personal relationship with that, taking your lead from that. So a big showdown between those who would choose to decide for themselves that they are their own authorities and stand in a relationship of power to themselves and in their own lives, and those who believe that humanity ought to be managed and treated as though they were children. And so you want to pay attention to in your own life, where you are not standing in a relationship, in a sound relationship with your own authority, your own power, your relationships in your life. Where do you find closest to you? Are you giving away your sense of authority to what things? And invariably, your own personal relationship with authority and power in your own life is going to condition what you believe about what is happening in the outer world and on the global scale. The more that you are out of touch with your own sense of authority and power, the more you will tend to acquiesce to being managed. The more out of touch you are with your own authority in your personal life, the more that you acquiesce to being managed. Coming into power, it would require courage. It would require you to take up the mantle of being the master of your own destiny. And some people, some levels of consciousness, are not yet ready to take on the mantle of being the master of their own destiny. It's easier to be controlled and to be told what to do. Go here, do that. Sit here, Simon says. Jump how high. It's easier to be told what to do than to take up the creative mantle to say, well, what will I create from my position as a sovereign, human, free agent? What world am I going to create from my position as a human, sovereign, free agent? You have to take responsibility for a sort of radical creativity. Yes. And so some are not ready to do that because it would mean that you can't hide behind excuses. You can't hide behind excuses for not taking charge of your life, the crutches that you might use to avoid creating, to avoid being more present with the full spectrum of the dynamics of your consciousness and what you're capable of. So you would shy away from the full scope of your creativity. And so, well, what is power then? What is it? What is that quality that we're talking about? What is power? Power would, on one level, involve your sovereign ability to see the relationship between your consciousness, the quality of your awareness, and the external physical effects that it produces. That's the one thing to see and notice. But then to take charge of your relationship with that outer reality by learning to direct your consciousness through it. So you navigate reality through the vehicle of your consciousness. Your consciousness operates with a physical mechanism, a body vehicle. But you are riding through any, let's say, dimension of awareness. You are always riding through it with your consciousness. You're principally riding through any dimension of reality using your awareness, the quality of your awareness. And so directing your consciousness to move through your physical world, riding through by the buggy, by the plane, traveling, let's say, whatever your preferred means of transportation is in your mind. You can imagine what your consciousness would look like if it were a means of transportation. So, but you are riding the highways of reality through your consciousness. And so those who would want to manage you would want you to forget that you are riding principally through reality with the quality of your internal world, principally. And so great power comes when you take charge of that process. Power, well, the ability to work cooperatively with the forces of existence. That's one way of looking at power. The ability to work cooperatively with the forces of existence for good. That's the formulation we want to give. Power, the ability to marshal the forces of existence for good. With power comes a demand for integrity. And so make no mistake about it. When you have power, so to speak, without integrity, well, there are great consequences for those who would have a lot of power but do not use that with integrity. There are big consequences. Have to abuse power and disenfranchise other people of their power. Well, it shows that you don't really believe in your own power. And so many forces, well, they seem big and bold and monolithic, but their actions, how they have to strive to amass power at any means or using any means, well, it would show you and demonstrate to you what the nature of the underlying belief is. So any institution who thinks it is necessary to disenfranchise other people of their own power, well, it demonstrates a lack of certainty of their own power. And so something to be aware of. When you have power, there is a spiritual duty to use power for good. When you have a lot of power, there is a spiritual duty to use power for good. It is a cosmic, let's say, spiritual duty. And so humanity would play out those lessons to do with power and integrity, and let's say so are many others playing out these lessons. Any species, any group of consciousness has a duty, a spiritual duty, to use power for good cooperatively with the forces of existence that would support life. Let's say that. And so true power is only bestowed to those who have enough integrity to use that power wisely for a higher good. These are not just lofty concepts. They have profound spiritual implications. And so what we want to emphasize is, well, you're not going to fight, you're not going to combat, you're not going to beat down someone else to take your own power. Because to fight for it means that you do not believe that you have it in the first place. And so when you go fighting for or combating for a sense of your own dignity, what you're saying is, oh, I'm requesting it from someone else. I'm going to fight you for my own sense of power. A thought pattern in the collective is that, well, someone has to do something for me, give me something for me to see and know and acknowledge my own power. And so when you do that, when you demand that someone give you something to make you feel as though you have dignity, well, you've lost the game, because that belief in the need for someone to give you something for you to know yourself as a dignified, self-sovereign human, well, that would rest on a belief that you have no power. And so that is one dynamic playing itself out in the final Pluto in Capricorn years. Always there is a relationship between the power dynamics you face in your own life and your idea of power on a collective kind of scale. The more willing that you are to deny yourself sovereignty in your own personal life, the more that you, let's say, make yourself available for institutions, managers to rob you of your own authority. These are some things that we wanted to highlight in the wind down years of Pluto in Capricorn as we approach Pluto moving into Aquarius. Aquarius, a sign that deeply favors individual autonomy and freedom as a basis for collective autonomy and freedom. That is the structure that inherently is encoded into the Aquarian template and zodiacal field. A consciousness having to do with the relationship between the individual and the collective. So when individual power, autonomy, and freedom is preserved, well, it sets the basis for that to happen on a collective level. And so some of you are quite ready to throw off the managerial consciousness that believes that humanity must be controlled or managed. And so yes, Pluto in Aquarius is on the horizon, and many of you who would watch the astrology, you tend to think in a very sort of forward-reaching way. What's next on the calendar astrologically? But what have you learned since 2008? Where have you stepped into your power? What have you learned in your own personal life in relation to power? What lessons, what soul lessons, what victories in consciousness have you had in terms of coming into your own personal power? Where have you stumbled along the way? So think about these last few years, this last Capricorn cycle. What have I learned about myself and my relationship to power? What notes will I make in my notebook about power? It's good to reflect and think about things. So often you are ready to approach the next phase, but you haven't had any sense of what the current phase has been asking of you. And so you miss the essential preparation that is a prerequisite for graduating into the next phase. And so you have to pay attention in class to the current lesson before you go on to mastering the next one. And so a few things to think about there. Alright, so reminding you as usual that I'm available for a range of astrological and spiritual counseling consultations. And links to that are in the description box below, where you'll also find links to keep in touch if you'd like these reflections and seminars and teachings to be sent to your inbox. May you be empowered. May you be wise. May you wield your personal power in your life with grace magnanimousness. Being in integrity means that you have respect for yourself. Being empowered means that you have respect for yourself. And so we will leave things there for now for your consideration and reflection. So until next time, talk soon. Bye.